Okay, so today I have to prepare paintings for an exhibition. This is my CD rack, and these are the paintings I will be preparing. This one as well, and that one. I thought it would be interesting to see how I polish the paintings before they go out for the exhibition. So what I'll be doing is some glazing. I will be retouching just areas that may need to be retouched. Making some changes to edges, some areas where I feel like there's not enough variety of edge. A lot of, when I do these critiques for my critique group, I often point out repetition in shapes and sort of, repeating elements that aren't getting smaller as they move back into the distance. Things like that, when I'm out doing these paintings, standing on the street and lots of things going on and it's difficult to concentrate. So I also make these kinds of errors, and I will sometimes fix them if I feel like it's gonna make a big difference. But the main thing I do is polish and glazes, and I'll talk a little bit about the approach to painting on a completely dry painting. Now, these have all been dry for 6 months at least, about 7 months now. And so I shouldn't have any problems with cracking at a later date. So glaze to my heart's content and layer on thin, thick, whatever, and not have any issues. One problem I might have is beading. What happens is you start to put the paint down and it doesn't stick. It's something that happens with mediums. It's happened to me mainly with sun-thick and linseed oil-based mediums. I've seen it, you can see it if you get up close to a painting by Isaac Levitan. So it's not a problem that's new to our materials in particular. And I know artists using other mediums have the same issue. So it doesn't always happen. I always use the same medium, so I haven't really figured out what is changing to get, sometimes you get really bad beading and sometimes almost none. So with that said, we'll jump in and I will show you how I retouch, repolish the paintings before they go out to the gallery, okay? Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is just check to see how bad the beading is gonna be. I don't think it's going to be so bad here. So what I often like to do is what we call oiling out. So I'll take a little bit of medium and touch of my thinner and a clean brush. And then I'll just put it all over the painting to bring back the colors to what they were when I was painting. When the painting is wet, obviously it's not so sunk in. And it's really going to bring out these blacks again. It's not really blacks, but darks. And it's really nice to paint into it. Okay, there is actually some beading. It's interesting, there isn't really any beading over here, but I'm getting a lot right in the middle. And now what I'm going to do is just wipe it off with a paper towel. So I want a little bit of oil, but not too much. And again, because the painting is completely dry, nothing's coming off except the oil. Okay. So now the next stage is I'm going to remove with a small palette knife brush hairs. And I'm just going to kind of file down the little bump left by the hair. The other thing to look for is, sometimes you painting on the beach, you're going to get sand, insects. So it looks pretty good now. Now this painting, I don't really have a lot of editing that I want to do. What I do remember though is that, I wanted to get the effect of the light coming down and then maybe some light on these leaves. So I might just slightly darken area around the leaves and lighten the leaves just a touch. I don't like reworking my stuff in the studio too much because I feel like what I got out there, I tend to trust myself more when I'm working from life. So, but yeah, I'll just show you what we can do is just glaze just around. So I'm taking some medium, some terps, make kind of dark gray. Maybe a touch more brown. And then we can just kind of glaze the area around the leaves to make it just a touch darker. This is kind of like what you would do in a photography studio, right? With the dodging and burning. And what I'll do is kind of gradate it out. So it's just going to make this kind of pop a touch more. And actually, this might be a bit too bright. That is supposed to be in the shadow still. And then we can also lighten maybe the leaves a touch. And again, it's a very thin paint. Okay. And let's see. I mean, here there's some little scratch or something from, which just doesn't look good. Okay. And then, I mean, these little areas here are where my panel holder. My wife always retouches hers in the field, which probably wouldn't be a bad idea. Let's see, this is much lighter, so that's going to be the color up there. You can take that maybe just a touch lighter as well. And like I say, I don't like doing any real drastic changes on a painting that I'm happy with. So this I felt came out fine, so I don't really need to make a lot of changes. But because it's completely dry, I can also change my mind if I do too much. And then, as I said, we can also just maybe sharpen an edge or two. Okay. And then we have to sign the painting, and I actually like signing with rounds. And I often use kind of a warm red, I mean, either from a dark, cool red to a warm orangish red. And it's kind of a traditional landscape signature color. I mean, the earliest ones I've seen are the Olive Carreau's little studies. And you have to wonder if he signed them or somebody was trying to sell them later, but. So yeah, round brush and quite thin paint. And I'm going to sign it here on the easel, but normally I will actually just take it and set it on a desk because it's much easier. Okay. So now that's going to go back into the rack. And like I say, it's looking good in the sense that we're probably going to get a very uniform, not too glossy a glaze, but it's going to sink in a touch. And I think what I find these days is that clients often prefer not necessarily completely matte, but not a really glossy glaze, because there's a lot of windows in most houses these days. And especially on a larger painting, if you have a really, really bright glaze on it, you can't see it from anywhere because there's always going to be light reflecting on it. So something to consider. Okay, so next up, this is kind of an interesting painting because it's orange. And that was not my intention. What happened here was I was using one of my little LEDs, and I had a window next to me, and the light was too cool. So everything came out too warm. So now what I'm going to do is basically glaze the whole thing blue to try to counteract some of the warm colors. I remember seeing an exhibition of Picasso's blue period and wondering if he just had an orange building right outside his window or something reflecting into the room, because that would be a very easy way to end up with all your paintings being blue. And actually, I say that because I also saw some students of mine who once asked me to come look at their studio because they were having issues matching their color. And they also had a big orange, it was actually a pipe outside their window, right next to the window and in a position where it was getting the sunlight. And sure enough, they had this bright orange light coming into the studio, even though they had a north-facing window. And that's why they were struggling to get their colors. So what I'm doing here first is I carry the wet paintings by putting a cork. I cut it up into quarters, stick it between the paintings, and then tape them together. And then when I get back into the studio, I have to scrape off the little bits of cork and also look for any brush hairs, but I don't really see any. Maybe a little one up here. But it's fallen out now. And no insects. So same as before, we'll start with we'll start by oiling out medium and thinner. So like the last time, I'm seeing a little bit of beading, but when I rub it down with the paper towel, it's all going to come out. So like last time, we're seeing a bit of beading, but again, I'll just rub it in with the paper towel and we should be fine. It's funny, there's the little dots in the painting, and I think it's from the flour that was in the air. This was actually a working mill, and there was flour everywhere on the floor. Okay, so now we're going to try to counterbalance. Put a bit more medium out. This is a cobalt blue. It's very transparent already. Now, one thing I have to be careful with is I want the blue glaze in some areas, but not everywhere. So first I'll probably put it down across a lot of the painting, and then I'll take it out. But you can see already that's going much cooler and making it much more of the kind of gray that I was seeing in that area. I'm going to add a touch of the cerulean just because I'm kind of struggling with how transparent this cobalt is. Getting a lot of lines from the bristle brush hairs, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I find the effect slightly too strong. So I'm just going to take it down a bit with the sable here. Now I don't want to, the areas where there's actual warm light coming in, I don't want to go too blue. So the same up in here, I'm really just sticking with the shadow areas, and maybe not even all of them, because we can have some warm kind of reds and purples up there. Okay, so now we have, before there was a general sort of orange effect everywhere. Now we have some warm areas in here. It's still orange down in here. It's gone much bluer, much grayer here and in here, and a bit in some of the darks. We still have a bit of red in some of these areas. So I think it's becoming a more interesting. And take the blue out of there, and maybe I tried to put a bit of blue in there because of the light coming from outside, which was, being the sky was quite cool. So it's not that cool, but next to the orange, I think it looks quite nice. So I don't think I need to change that too much. It looks better. And again, the nice thing about glazing on a painting that's completely dry is if you feel that it's less successful, then you can just wipe it off. Now the question is down in here. Maybe about in there, it's maybe a touch too orange still. So right now it looks blue there. What I want is this kind of an effect where it basically just becomes gray. I don't want to see that much of the blue pigment. So I'll push it off with the brush. And I can even wipe it down a touch. And it's going to keep the sort of cool feeling without actually seeing the blue pigment. Okay, I think that looks a lot better. Like I said, I don't want it to all be blue or gray. I kind of like the warmth in the colors, but I just felt like it was, the whole painting was orange. And now we've managed to take it back to where it's sort of browns and grays and blues. Okay, I think that's a much more sort of natural looking sort of colors. And then let's cover up the cork in the corners. And last but not least, we'll do a little bit of editing of the shape on this wheel, which just doesn't look completely circular to me. Okay. And since it's already quite a warm painting, we will sign it with kind of a cool red. Okay, so next, okay, so like with the last one, we will start by oiling out. And again, we're not having a lot of problems with beading, which is nice. This current batch of medium, I actually made by thickening the oil myself and buying the Canada Balsam. So, like I said, I've never figured out why the beading is bad sometimes or worse sometimes. I often suspected it was perhaps the humidity that was absorbed into the oil, because it's the only thing I've noticed that changes from one batch to the other. But that said, this soil probably would have had a lot of humidity, and it seems to be working quite well. So let's find another theory. And as before, I will then wipe the oil down because I don't want too much. Should be a bit careful if you're wiping a lot of oil off onto paper towels or rags that you don't leave it all in the trash can where you can get combustion. Now, I personally have never seen my medium even heat up, and this isn't really enough to start a fire, but it's something that you should be aware of. Okay. Now we will mix some blue, some sky color. And I've noticed that if I mix just pure blue back in the studio with white, it's often going to be too high chroma. So I'll add a touch of kind of mud to it to knock the chroma down, because I find that when I'm painting out in the field, I often, for some reason, my brushes are never, my blues are never that clean. So that matches quite well. And then, so yeah, I actually did a pretty good job of getting this line straight. The only issue is that I lost a touch of the sky over there. And the panel coming through makes it look a bit weird. Okay, so that should be straighter. And the same with this building. Now there's a bit of a bow, so. And then often in my paintings, I leave a little bit of the board coming through, and then I have to kind of decide how much I want to cover that up. There's a bit of mud. And then maybe just in here, this can come. Okay, so not a lot needs to be done on that one. Now for the signature, we'll do kind of a middle red on this one. Okay. Okay, so this painting is kind of interesting because it was done really just as a study for a larger painting. So I wasn't quite as concerned with the composition, which is why this sort of split down the middle. This in real life was actually probably that long, but I wanted to get this turn in to be able to use it for a larger painting. So I shrunk all this down. These widths are quite similar. The mountains back here are quite large in relationship to the foreground. So it's not the most brilliant composition, but like I say, I was using that really for with the intention in my head of making a larger painting. So I just wanted to get certain areas down. So as far as retouching it goes, I would have to repaint a lot of things to make this into something I wanted. That said, though, you never know. Sometimes the paintings that I might not be that pleased with sometimes are the first ones to sell. So we are going to polish it up and then let somebody else decide what they think about it. So like with the other ones, we will begin by oiling out. And then we will wipe it all off. First, we'll polish up all the little missing spots. And again, here, this is a clean blue and white, and you can see how it's much too high chromas. Add a touch of mud to it. And then back along the horizon here, you can kind of fix up some of these shapes, maybe soften some of the edges. And one thing that's happening in this painting too is we have the values are quite similar all the way from down here up to here. Now it gets a bit bluer, but it's quite red in there. So one thing we can do now is bring in kind of an ultramarine and white. Let's use the sable. And just make that distant blue slightly. Actually, I'm going to use cobalt instead of ultramarine. Make it slightly higher chroma and a bit more atmospheric perspective. So it just gives us a bit more sort of feeling of air and distance. Now you can see it much better here. It just gives us a stronger sense of the atmosphere. Make it a bit more atmospheric between the two hills here to give us a sense of the valley. As I work my way down, I'm just kind of hitting the shadow areas down here. And not adding more pigment so that I have more of the effect higher up here and less as we get further down. And then after this dries, we can also go back in with an alizarin glaze just to give it a bit of warmth because it's very green right now. So yeah, I think that looks a lot better. And then I'll just touch up some of these messy areas. And like down in here, I've just changed the blue, but I want to get it back to what it was because I don't want to be changing colors too much. As I said before, I tend to trust what I did in nature more, so I'm not going to make any real strong edits down in here. And let's see. I guess one other thing we can do is just put in a few kind of brighter accents down here just to pull the foreground forward a touch. Not too bright like I did there. Use the higher chroma yellow for some of these areas here. Move some of the repetition in these brush strokes. Okay, so we'll stop there. Actually, this bright blue is quite nice. Maybe we can bring a bit more over just in the area next to it. Okay. Okay, so I made a few other changes on this painting without the cameras rolling because I need to be able to stand in front. I mean, I'm trying to have you guys look over my shoulder, but it's much easier for me to think about things. But I'll just say I put some little lines up in here, added another tree here just because there was kind of an empty space. And then I put in some, like a larger shape here and a medium, just to get a bit of a sense of that field pulling in to the view. Now I was going to sign the painting, and I thought what I would do is use kind of a light signature. And one, when you're thinking about where to sign your painting, now down in the right corner is obviously a very common place, but we have so much going on over here. So you can use the signature to kind of counterbalance a lot of weight. So in this case, I'm going to put it over here in this empty space and then try to, offset some of the weight on this side at the lower part of the painting. So for the color, I'm going to do kind of a brighter red because I feel like there's a lot of cools in here anyways. So. Okay, so this will be the last one that I'm going to do. And we have here, again, we'll start with oiling out. So this was an afternoon painting. And one thing that could be interesting is if we made it into a bit more of a late afternoon painting by putting a glaze over it. So I did this recently on the larger painting that I did from this study. So I thought I would show you, I didn't film that, so I thought I'd show you basically the same thing done on a smaller painting. So what I have here is I've taken the 3 yellows because I find that just one, get what I want. I want kind of this, basically kind of a golden light, transparent, clean brush, clean palette, clean medium. And then we'll just put this all over everywhere where we have a touch of light. It's basically going to unify all of these light areas with this golden glow. So I'm kind of avoiding the shadow areas. And you can see how it gives you that sort of golden evening light. And as we get further away, I'm reducing the cadmiums and getting more ochre. As we get closer, you can add more cadmium. And then obviously we need to do the reflection as well. But we'll make it a touch darker, a touch more ochre, less of the light cadmium. And especially it's nice when you have impastos, because it kind of just sits in the little grooves. We'll put them over the beach as well, the riverbank. And I want it to be a bit lighter up above. Over here, it's not a touch too dark. Okay. So that now gives us, there's a lot more sophistication down here now, especially where the glaze is sort of sitting in the impastos, and just gives it a very nice kind of warm effect. One issue though is that this sort of blue sky is still very much an afternoon color, so we would then take the sky just a touch sort of pink or salmon down on the horizon, more of what you would see it when the light would be that low and that yellow. We can even add a touch of kind of greenish color that you get. Again, all done with glazes. Okay. So now it's a more kind of an interesting evening light. And I'm going to stop there because I kind of need to get through these, and it's too difficult for me to paint with you looking over my shoulder. So hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next month.